if it came to your desk, you would sign a bill that did that. Roe protected access until fetal viability, which it also says is, quote, at about 7 months, but it may occur earlier, even at 24 weeks. So do you similarly support also codifying Roe's restrictions, which allowed states to ban abortion in the 3rd trimester of pregnancy unless necessary to save the mother's life?
We need to put the protections of Roe v. Wade back into law. And when that bill gets passed by Congress, I will proudly sign it into law. Understand what is happening in our country. Over 20 states have passed what I call Trump abortion bans because I understand how we got here. The former president handpicked 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade. They did as he intended, and in state after state, laws have been passed criminalizing healthcare providers. I don't know if anyone here has heard most recently the stories out of Georgia. Tragic story about a young woman who died because it appears the people who should have given her health care were afraid they'd be criminalized after the Dobbs decision came down. Laws that make no exception even for rape or incest, which means that you're telling a survivor of a crime of a violation to their body that they have no right to make a decision about what happens to their body next, which is immoral. An approach that doesn't take into account that most people, I think, agree you don't have to abandon your faith or deeply held beliefs to agree the government should not be telling her what to do with her body. If she chooses, she will talk with her pastor, her priest, her rabbi, her imam, but it should not be the government or Donald Trump telling her what to do about her own body and her life. So that's where I stand. We need to put back in place the protection of Roe v. Wade and put that into law.
And those restrictions that are also in.
We need to put back in place the protections of Roe v. Wade and let an individual, in consultation with her doctor, make the decision based on what she can determine, because she's smart enough to know what's in her best interest instead of having her government tell her what to do, especially a bunch of people in these state capitals who think they're in a better position to tell her what to do than she is to know what's in her best interest.
Before we conclude, Madam Vice President, Joyful Warrior has been used to describe
You didn't see
campaign.
that just a minute ago, though. Okay, back to my joyful part.
And your opponent, Republicans, have at times weaponized you laughing in campaign ads, for example. Why is joy important to you to insert into this election, and what do you make of Republicans using that as a way to suggest that you're not a serious candidate?
Well, sometimes I think, and I'll say to whoever the young people are who are watching this, there are some times when your adversaries will try and turn your strength into a weakness. Don't you let them. Don't you let them. I find joy in the American people. I find joy and optimism in what I see to be our future and our ability to invest in it. I find joy in the ambition of the people. I find joy in the dreams of the people. I find joy in building community. I find joy in building coalitions. I find joy in believing that the true measure of the strength of a leader is not based on who you beat down, but who you lift up. And I think we should all find joy and have a sense of optimism about who we are as Americans and what we mean to each other and what we can do to lift each other up.
Madam, President Biden spoke to President Trump after the attempt on his life this weekend. Have you spoken to him? And earlier today, I assume?
Yes.
How'd that go? You want to give us some intel?
Sure. I checked on him to see if he was okay. And I told him what I have said publicly. There's no place for political violence in our country. I am in this election and in this race for many reasons, including to fight for our democracy. And in a democracy, there is no place for political violence. We can and should have healthy debates and discussion and disagreements, but not resort to violence to resolve those issues.
On January 6th, your vehicle was allowed to kind of pass blast a viable pipe bomb. We've seen...
No, I was in the building.
You were in the building. And we've seen what's happened with former President Trump. Do you have full confidence in the Secret Service to protect all of you?
I do.
You feel safe for you and your family?
I do. But, I mean, you can go back to Ohio. Not everybody has Secret Service. And there are far too many people in our country right now who are not feeling safe. I mean, I look at Project 2025, and I look at, you know, like the Don't Say Gay laws coming out of Florida. Members of the LGBTQ community don't feel safe right now. Immigrants or people with an immigrant background don't feel safe right now. Women don't feel safe right now. And so, yes, I feel safe. I have Secret Service protection. But that doesn't change my perspective on the importance of fighting for the safety of everybody in our country. And doing everything we can to, again, lift people up and not beat people down so they feel alone and are made to feel small and made to feel like they're somehow not a part of it or us.
Madam Vice President, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. I've appreciated this. Thank you. Thank you.
We've been listening to Vice President Kamala Harris in Philadelphia speaking to journalists at an event held by the National Association of Black Journalists. This coincides or is a response to an event that the NABJ held with Donald Trump a few months ago. A vastly different event here, a much more measured conversation with the Vice President, and they touched on an array of subjects, including her confidence in the Secret Service following the attempted assassination of Donald Trump, the second attempted assassination. She actually said that she spoke with Donald Trump and told him, according to her, that there is no place for political violence in our democracy, also asking to see if he was okay. They also talked about her laughter being used as an attack against her by Republicans, the economy, the war in Gaza, reparations, attacks on immigrants in Ohio. She spoke extensively on that, as well as gun control and reproductive rights.
Yeah, that's right. And there will be questions, which we will ask our panel here. CNN's Priscilla Alvarez is with us, Eva McKen, David Chalian, and the Atlanta Journal-Constitution's Tia Mitchell as well. To you guys here in studio first, I wonder if you thought it was substantive enough, and I will point specifically to a couple of examples. She was asked about her plans beyond the child tax credit for things like elder care to help families. She didn't actually end up really getting into specifics, and I know as journalists we love specifics, and candidates don't always. She was also asked about whether there might be a federal response or it might be necessary when it comes to Springfield, Ohio. She did talk at length about how she feels about these issues, but maybe she didn't really commit to answering that question, Eva.
Well, I think that in broad terms, like she did actually say quite a bit. She talked about the low housing supply, how no family should pay more than 7% of their income on child care, increased wages for home health care providers. She talked about her plan for small business owners. So we did get quite a bit. And I think ultimately the goal here is to try to draw contrast with the former president. There was a very different episode when the former president was in conversation with NABJ members weeks ago, right? There was a lot of theatrics. And to me, she looked up there to be a serious leader who is thinking very passionately and thoughtfully about these issues. What surprised me is how much she talked about race. She doesn't really emphasize race or identity on the campaign trail, but she spoke at length about the situation in Ohio and then draw parallels to past comments that the former president has made that she suggested were racist. So that was surprising to me. But I think that overall, you know, the goal here is to show that she values the time and the attention of black journalists to speak directly to black voters in this platform, and then to also illustrate that she is a serious leader.
She described the situation in Ohio as a crying shame. She went on to say that when you have a microphone that big, you shouldn't use it to spew lies based on tropes. She said it's something not new, and she reflected on Donald Trump's track record in the past when it comes to housing for minority communities, his call for the Central Park 5 to be executed, as well as the racist birther lie about former President Obama. What did you make of it?
I mean, that what you just went through was lifted from her debate prep, because we heard that on the debate stage that she referenced. She said, as I said at the debate last week, and then she went into this litany of charges against Trump for his, although I don't think she ever used the term racist in the way she described it, but clearly was suggesting that he continues to peddle these, as she called them, tropes, and that it's not new. I mean, I think her extensive remarks about Ohio and her bit at the end saying that she did call Donald Trump to check if he was okay after the second assassination attempt, I think those are your two pieces of news out of this. I think this is the most we've heard from her on the Springfield, Ohio situation, and clearly she, to Eva's point, she wasn't looking to sidestep that at all. She wanted to step right into that, call Trump and Vance out for their rhetoric, and firmly plant herself in saying that, she painted the picture of it being photo day at the elementary school, and an elementary school needed to be evacuated, and saying to the audience, do you remember what it's like on photo day? She clearly wanted to draw that contrast of what she thinks is irresponsible rhetoric coming from Trump and Vance on this. To your point, Brianna, about how substantive or policy specific she is, Hillary Clinton's on a book tour now, and she was asked by Kara Swisher, a colleague of ours, in an interview if she would advise her to roll out more policy. Hillary Clinton could not have been fast enough at saying, no, don't do that. Her advice is to not do that. I don't think it's some sense of hiding the ball in any way from the American people. My sense of what Clinton was saying in that interview, and what I think in talking to Harris advisors, that's not necessarily where they think voters are in their decision-making process and adjudicating the choice before them between Harris and Trump. It's not necessarily about which detailed policy plans you line up and think about are going to be the best. I think you'll get some more policy from her over the course of the next 49 days, but not a ton and not really detailed, because I don't think that's where they think voters are in making their choices.
They need a general sense of where she stands on key issues, and I think that's what we got out of this conversation.
Yeah, and look, the governing environment is always different. We know that, where it is many months and even years into a presidential term from now.
And see, by the way, if that's the right bet.
Yeah,
voters
right.
may say, no, at the end of the day, we wanted more policy specific. So
I wanted
that's
specifics.
just, yeah.
Tia, to you, the answer to the first question about, which was sort of which I appreciated, a lift from the debate about 4 years ago, how are we compared to 4 years ago? And she emphasized that the Biden administration was left with a mess. From the Trump administration, she said groceries are still too high and there's work to do. What did you think about how she answered that?
Yeah, I think that was an important answer. I'm here in Atlanta. Atlanta voters are being inundated with ads. One of them from the Trump campaign goes after Kamala Harris specifically on the economy. And it basically ridicules her for saying, Bidenomics is working, indicating that, she's oblivious to the concerns that voters have about the state of the economy and the cost of goods, mainly groceries and gas right now. And so I think she wanted to respond to that head on, because we know that the attacks from Republicans on the economy are probably arguably her biggest weakness. So I think what she's trying to do is frame it and say, look, yes, we know things are still not great in a lot of ways. We know that regular folks are still having concerns, still worried about the cost of goods, but let's take you back to where we started from. Let's help you understand where we're at and where things have improved. And she wants to highlight where she does think Bidenomics, the Biden administration's goals and accomplishments have helped. Also, she used that as an opportunity to talk about where she wanted to go, to talk about the things that she would try to accomplish that she says would help working class families if she were elected president.
Priscilla Alvarez is live outside of this event in Philadelphia, and she's been covering the Harris campaign. Priscilla, there weren't a lot of contentious moments in this conversation, but there were some slightly tense exchanges, specifically on the war in Gaza. The vice president there was asked repeatedly, and I believe Eugene Daniels, a Politico, tried to zero in with her what specific policy differences she would have with President Biden that would potentially expedite a ceasefire and hostage deal. And she touted what's been done before, but she didn't specifically outline any real difference with Biden. What did you read into that exchange?
That's right, Boris. The journalists tried to ask her multiple times whether there would be any policy change if she were to win in November, and she wouldn't answer that question, repeatedly going back to the need right now for a ceasefire deal in exchange for hostages. Now, this has been a vulnerability for her. It was a vulnerability for President Joe Biden. At her rallies, she is still often faced with protesters in the crowd. But her allies and her advisors that I've spoken with have noted that she has injected a level of humanity into the conversations about the war in Gaza. Remember, it was her remarks in Selma that stood out as a moment this year when she talked about the plight of Palestinians in Gaza in the middle of this Israel-Hamas war. But she has been asked multiple times since then whether there would be any difference with her if she were to win, and she has suggested over the course of these last few weeks and months that she is in lockstep with President Joe Biden on the policy with Israel, saying that they have a right to defend themselves, while also noting that Palestinians have suffered tremendously in Gaza. She mentioned briefly when there were weapons that were held back from the war. That was one instance where there was a pause, as there was some tension between the U.S. and Israel. But again, when pressed, she did not answer if that was something that she would continue or we would see more of if she were to win. So certainly that is an ongoing question, whether there would be any policy change. But her advisors have also noted time and again that she is in lockstep with the president on its policy. Now, the ceasefire deal, she has been part of those conversations. She referenced conversations that she had with the Israeli Prime Minister, as well with President Joe Biden on this very issue. But the deal has not come to fruition. It has been largely stalled. There remains questions as to whether or not that deal can come together at all. But she did not, again, give any sense of whether there would be any differences under a Harris administration, Boris.
All right. Priscilla, thank you so much. Everyone, thank you so much for the great conversation. We do appreciate it. And